Hello once again, race fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Dropping the Hammer Racing Hour. Thank you so much for listening in. I'm Alex Gray, along here with Michael Klein, and we are welcoming back a special guest we've had on before. He just actually got off running the Atlanta truck race, Mr. Bill Lester. Thank you for coming on, Bill.
Hey, thanks for having me back, guys.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
You go ahead, man.
Okay. So let's talk about the truck race and the opportunity to get back in the truck, and what was that like, and was there anything that felt different since you were last in a truck?
It was definitely different than when I left it in 2007. The biggest difference, I would say, is the crate motor or Ilmor motor. It's very different than what I was used to when I left, when the manufacturers provided their own bullets. We were spinning these things to almost 9,000 RPM, definitely like 8,800. And, the motors they put in there now, these things pretty much top out around, 72, 73. They're very low RPM, and they have a lot of torque, but they don't have a lot of response. So what I mean by that is if, you're on the pipe and you get off of it, then it's hard to get that momentum back. And that was a very different feeling than what I had left with before. These things, they caught right back up. You could get out of the power, roll the corner or whatever and get back into it, and the response was there. These things, when you get out of the power, it's like it just falls down. It almost takes a running start to get it spooled back up. So that was a huge difference. I wasn't really prepared for that. I was told that was the case, but I really, never experienced it until they dropped the green flag. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, now I know what they're talking about. And it was really much more severe than I would have anticipated. It was a pretty big wake-up call, kind of raised my eyebrows. And the other thing is that they've really done a whole lot to improve aerodynamics on the truck. They provide, from what I could tell, much more downforce than they had before. And those things, they really stick pretty well in the corner if you're handling right. The biggest issue I had, coming back after as long a period of time that as I've been gone, and then with a brand new team, is that I had no chemistry or rapport with them. And so they didn't know really what to give me. And obviously I didn't know really what to ask for, but they gave me a setup they thought would be to my liking. And I didn't like it at all. It was loose as heck, and from the word go, even on stickers, I was essentially a couple of laps in, starting to turn to the right, going through the corners. And, when you're starting to swat bees at 180 miles an hour into corners, it's not a whole lot of fun. So that caused me to, not be able to commit to the power. And, like I told you before, if you get out of it, then you're toast. And so that's kind of what I experienced. So that made for a very long day. But, all in all, I'm happy with the fact that I got off the couch and, I did one of the things that I talk about in my book, Winning in Reverse, which is getting out of your comfort zone. I've always liked racing. I wanted to know what it would be like to come back after such a long time, and I challenged myself, and I did it. And, I did it without stuffing it, throwing it into the fence. And proud of that as well, because while I got enough support from partners that I was able to get behind me, that covered the cost to get into the event, but that did not cover any kind of crash damage or anything like that might have been occurred. So if I fenced that son of a gun, that would have been out of my own personal pocket. So needless to say, when I told my wife about, the idea of coming back, she's like, what kind of, responsibilities financially might we have with regard to this? When I told her about that, she definitely looked at me sideways, but fortunately, she's always been in my corner and always been very supportive. And, she believed in me like I believe in myself. And she let me roll the dice, and we did it. So I was happy about that, obviously, because that would have been a huge financial strain had anything gone sideways, even if it was no fault of my own. Somebody wrecks in front of me and I wind up getting collected or whatever the case is. If the truck doesn't come back onto the hauler like it left, that's on me. One example was like if you miss a shift and wind up just, blowing the motor up totally, just destroying the engine. That's $40,000 right there. So needless to say, with that kind of, financial pressure over your shoulders, it's kind of like, okay, let's not do anything that's going to, be a Herculean attempt, but a fail in terms of execution. So I drove a fairly, not conservative race, but I didn't do the sort of things that I really would have liked to have done for fear of the unknown, not knowing what the outcome might necessarily have been. And, I just couldn't afford to do that. But it was great to get back behind the wheel again and answer questions like, do I still enjoy it? Was I afraid of speed? Did I still like competition? And, all those things were like definitively answered. Yes, I still love going fast. I still love racing. I love Atlanta Motor Speedway. The faster, the better. I've always said with regard to my racing career, I was never one who was brought up on short tracks or bull rings. And so, I was never all that good on them. I was always told that, I overdrove them. But, on a speedway, it's hard to overdrive those, But, I really didn't have a chance to overdrive it because my truck didn't allow me to. So, but in any event, it was a good day. It was a great day weather-wise. It was fun to be back out there. The thing that kind of sucked, however, was that it was almost like a glorified test day. And, what I mean by that is that with the COVID measures in place, there were hardly any fans in the stands. Atlanta Motor Speedway gave, I'd say, 30% of capacity for what they could have done for a truck race. So, everybody was spread out. It's few and far in between. And, until the race actually started, you could almost hear a pin drop. It was just really weird to be there so early, and nobody was there. It was all quiet. Everybody's, quarantining for the most part and socially distancing and not a lot of interaction. It would have been fun to go into the garage area and, spend a lot of time, necessarily with folks and see what they're about and, introduce myself to those that don't know who I am and reacquaint myself with those I haven't seen in a while. But none of that really took place. Everybody was very, very cautious and concerned about staying safe. So it was a very odd scenario from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been a very bizarre time, and obviously it had to have been a big challenge knowing that, you weren't going to get any practice or qualifying. You're hopping in the truck and you're going. So, as you mentioned before, that's always been the big challenge for, I think, a lot of these racers. And I also have to ask, would you be willing to do this again, potentially?
If the right opportunity presented itself, for sure. I mean, to get into this event in Atlanta, I did some serious hustling. I basically turned over every stone and followed a whole lot of leads, and it reminded me one of the things I just didn't like about racing. I love the speed and the competition and the racing aspect, but I hate the politics and the business end, which is unless, you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, like a lot of these trust fund kids that are out there, I got to hustle for it. I got to get sponsors to get behind me. And, when I was doing that for this event, I was kind of like, you know what? This is one reason why I got out of racing because I can't stand it. People tell me I'm a great salesperson and that, I get people to buy in and to support me. And sure enough, this is a case in point, but I just don't like doing that. It feels like you're, begging for dollars, and it's just like, oh God. So that part was just really, it's like, blah. So if the right opportunity presented itself, and
part of it too.
Yeah, exactly. So, this isn't unique to me. But there are a lot of those drivers that are out there that don't have to worry about it, right? So that's a whole different, scenario where they can go out there, wreck them, and they make more, right? They don't have to worry about it. It's like, okay, give me another one for next week or whatever. I'm good. I'm ready to go with my helmet. But, for me, that could have set me back huge had there been anything that went south. So, I like the racing part. I really enjoyed it. And I think that, now that I know what these trucks are like, whereas I didn't really know a real sense of that before the green flags fell, I think it would be a different scenario. But, am I willing to go out there and hustle for it like I did before? Nah, I don't have that burning passion and desire like I once did, So the most important thing for me was just, could I do it? Think about it. 14 years of not having raced in a stock car to come back at the drop of a green flag and go 180 miles an hour. I didn't do anything really to, race-wise to prepare me for it. I did some simulation stuff. Don't get me wrong. I did some of that, but you can only get so much realism from simulation. You got to experience it. The simulator doesn't really give you the real feel of what it's like to be out there in the turbulence and, the right tire models and stuff like that. So it really makes it very difficult, but it gives you a sense, but it doesn't give you a real, true evaluation.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people now who ask me, is iRacing good for getting into racing? And I always say, it's a good tool to use to practice, but it never replaces the real thing. That's the main thing that people need to know about it, is that nothing is going to replace actually getting out there and getting behind the wheel.
Yeah, there's no question about that, right? I mean, you've nailed it, spot on. It's and with simulation, there's always a darn reset button. I mean, so that just gives you a false sense of confidence, right?
Right.
So, there's no reset button when you're out there. Yeah, there is none. I mean, shoot, that reset button costs you an arm and a leg typically. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like what you were saying earlier, it's like, for guys like us, who don't have the money to, just be like, hey, I got my helmet bag, let's go racing, For those of us who actually have to hustle for that, yeah, you have to pay for the damage when you wreck a car, like you were explaining. And I learned that in my very first USAC race when some idiot in front of me spun out and decided to try and do a 360 and drove straight into my path. Of course, it wasn't my fault, but it tore the hell out of the front of the car, and I got to pay for all of that. So
exactly, yeah.
It's almost like that. You wish you could have the reset button, but that's something that a lot of people don't understand about these smaller racers who don't have the resources that you see guys like William Byron or Chase Elliott have.
Right.
Yeah, the examples are pretty long. I mean, just about everybody who's out there comes from some form of money, and so that's just the way it is. I mean, you can't effectively, begrudge it, because that's the way it is. That's the way the sport has evolved. It's become such a money sport that talent almost becomes secondary. And, to a lot of the older guard and the quote-unquote purists, they hate it because of that. These kids didn't work for it. It's given to them. It's laid out for them. And they don't really have that appreciation of, having worked on their own stuff and gone out there and really hustled for the money. I mean, it's like, okay, mom, it's okay, dad, okay, uncle, okay, whatever the case is, who has money in the family, the road is paved. And, that's a great position for those to be in, but it doesn't really necessarily make it fair, does it?
Yeah, and, when you put it that way, that's honestly kind of how I did get started, because I remember that, my aunt owns a boat dealership, and my uncle owned a yogurt shop, and, they just kind of put a few $100s my way, and that's what really kick-started my career. So, but, obviously that was something that could only be done once, It's not something that was all the way to
take advantage of the opportunity. Yeah, and you take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't begrudge you for doing that. But the fact is, you do what you got to do and take advantage of, what you can take advantage of,
Yeah.
But there are a whole lot of drivers out there that are talented that will never get that far up the ladder because they don't have the financial wherewithal to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much how it is. And shifting over, obviously you mentioned your book earlier, Winning in Reverse. Let's talk about that, obviously. I hear it's a really good book.
Yeah, the reviews have been very stellar. I'm, very appreciative of the fact that those that have read it have been very pleased with what they've read and enjoyed it. And, again, the reviews have been good and what have you. And I'm, gracious that that's the case. You never know what it's going to be accepted as or received as. And, I'm just really pleased and surprised, to some degree that it's gotten the reception that it has. It's not as if I'm a experienced author. This was my first attempt with Jonathan Ingram, who co-wrote it with me, to put it out there. And, we worked hard, and I think our efforts are paying off. I mean, we really are proud of what we've produced. And, the thing that I think is the most, I think, gratifying thing about it is that it's just not a racing story. It's a motivational memoir with a racing backdrop. It talks about 8 keys to my being successful by my definition of success. Everybody defines success differently. Some people define success as how much money do you make, or how important is your job, or what car do you drive, or whatever the case is. I define success as happiness. And for me to be successful or happy, I found basically 8 keys that allowed me to do it. And so I basically have, written those down and talked about how each one of those played into my success. And it's something that anybody, no matter what it is that you're trying to achieve, or no matter what walk of life you're in, you don't have to be a racer. It's not, a particularly tailored to the racing industry or the racing, fan. But of course, when you see a race car driver on the front of it, which is me in a race car, that's going to obviously, get a certain audience. But anybody could pick this book up and I believe benefit from it. So that's one of the things that I find the most satisfying.
Yeah, I've read a bunch of it so far, and I'm really enjoying it. And, it definitely is nice to read about somebody who, obviously, I haven't faced all the struggles you have, and obviously we have two different backgrounds and stories, but just knowing that there's somebody who didn't come from money, sort of like how I did, who was able to fight his way to get to this level, definitely gives me a little bit of hope because, unfortunately, I recently lost all my sponsors due to health or COVID. So right now I'm kind of in this rebuilding phase of my career. So it's definitely good to go back and read something like that.
No, I appreciate that. It was definitely a situation where I stuck to it. I was discouraged early on and, questioned and, why are you out here? You guys don't race, all that kind of stuff. Your people don't race, blah, blah, blah. And I could have very easily just said, you know what, they're right, and give in. But I just never took no for an answer, and I kept at it. And even, waiting to the age of 40, by which I became a full-time professional race car driver, I don't think most people would have done that. Most people would have said, you know what, I guess I'm defeated. I guess it'll never happen. But I just couldn't shake the bug. I just couldn't take no. I just could not make it happen. And, to become a full-fledged professional race car driver at 40 breaks the mold, and to be a NASCAR Cup rookie at 45 pretty much breaks the mold. But by the same token, we got Jimmy Johnson running his IndyCar, rookie race this weekend at Barber and, in the IndyCar. So, I guess I'm not the only 45-year-old rookie. I guess he's going to do it now, too.
Well, you're there with Jimmy Johnson. That's pretty good company to be in.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
And I agree with the whole thing about, finding happiness. My dad always tells me, as long as you're happy, that's what matters. If you love doing what you're doing, you never really have to work because you enjoy doing it. And if you're happy, the rest will follow in life. And I definitely agree from that perspective as well.
Yeah, true story. I didn't want to look back on my life, having just stayed in the high-tech industry, which is not a bad industry to be in. There's nothing wrong with being, I had an electrical engineering computer science degree, and I was doing software development, and then, I was a research and development project manager, and there's nothing wrong with that industry, but it just was not my calling. Racing was always my calling. And so while I was, again, doing very well in that, discipline, I wasn't happy. So I didn't consider myself successful. And I just wasn't going to look back on my life and say, man, maybe I should have just stayed at it a little bit longer. Maybe I should have just applied myself completely. And that's what it took for me to get there. I had to apply myself completely. I had to leave, the comfort of having, an 8-to-5 job and, a financial security and all that kind of stuff. Fortunately, with my wife's blessing and with her support, but still, it was hard for me to do that because the way I was brought up was always like, the male definitely needs to be the breadwinner, all that kind of stuff, that traditional mindset, which my wife is like, no, I got you, I believe in you. Let's make this happen, or say that you gave it your best shot and it wasn't supposed to be, but it was to be and it happened. So, yeah, I'm glad that it worked out the way it did. It could have been, a totally different scenario. It could have been that after 3 years, by which point that was the period of time we set aside for me to turn into a full-time professional race car driver after leaving, corporate America. It could have been the case that I might have had to go right back to corporate America after 3 years of not getting to where I needed to go. But right at the very end, right when that 3-year window was closing up, that's when my ship came in.
Yeah, just something I was curious about. I just wanted to hear you talking about this here. Tell us about Willie T. Ribbs driving you around Sonoma in his street clothes with you hanging on the passenger side.
Yeah, that was a crazy deal. And, you can see a picture of it in the memoir, in the book. But Willie T. Ribbs was really a huge mentor to me. You know, he obviously was the first black driver to race in the Indy 500, and he was so successful in sports cars, road racing in IMSA and SCCA Trans Am, which were the two premier leagues of sports car racing in the 80s. And so, you know, he was doing everything I wanted to do. You know, he was successful. You know, he was out there winning. He was known. He was, you know, just tearing up the tracks, right? And so, fortunately, when I was working in the high-tech industry in Silicon Valley in Northern California, he lived around there as well, you know. So I would take just about every waking opportunity to go and spend time with him, because that's how I learned. I watched what he did. And, you know, it was kind of like learning at the, you know, the foot of the master, right? You know, I was kind of like his pupil, and I watched how, you know, he was always hustling, you know, trying to get sponsorship deals, always talking to his team, you know, all that sort of thing. And so, you know, he was very instrumental in allowing me to get my first professional race, to run it in 1989 in IMSA GTO event at Sears Point. And when I stepped from, you know, about a 240 horsepower Mazda RX-3 in SCCA amateur race trim to about a 700 horsepower full-fledged race car Chevy Camaro in the IMSA GTO series, that was a quantum leap, you know, not just in terms of horsepower, but in terms of downforce for the vehicle, in terms of straight-cut gearbox as opposed to a synchro-mesh box, which I had in the Mazda, in terms of, you know, the size of the brakes, just the whole thing, you know, full two-frame chassis, whereas, you know, my Mazda was, you know, unibody with a roll cage in it. It was a whole different deal, right? So I didn't really know what to expect. You know, I mean, this thing was a fire-breathing dragon. And so, you know, I had one test day. And so when I jumped behind the wheel of the car, I was doing things wrong, because I was doing things the way that I, you know, was used to, you know, driving an amateur race car as opposed to driving a professional, you know, professionally built full-fledged race car. And so after about a lap or two, you know, I pulled it in, and I was like, this thing just doesn't feel right. You know, I'm not shifting it right. Something's wrong. And Willie's like, yeah, I see you out there struggling. And he goes, hop over there on the passenger side, crawl in through the window, hang onto the roll bar, and I'm going to take you around for a lap and show you what you need to do in this car. And he did that in his street clothes. He didn't wear a helmet. You know, he had no racing gear on at all. It was completely, you know, I would say forbidden as far as if any track official saw him do that before he jumped in and we sprinted off. But that's exactly what he did. I mean, you know, no safety gear. He of course, buckled his seatbelt, but I don't even think he put the shoulder harnesses on. I think he just strapped on the lap belt, and then we went flying off onto turn one at Sears Point, and he took me around for a lap, and he said, Les, that's how you drive one of these cars, because that's how he referred to me. He didn't call me Bill. He didn't call me Lester. He just abbreviated my last name. He goes, Les, that's how you drive these things. And that was huge, because I would have just, you know, I'm sure at some point maybe figured it out, but he accelerated my learning curve exponentially.
Wow. Okay, that's really incredible. That
Believe me, that would not happen today.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, this was 1989, so things were a little bit more lax back then.
Oh, yeah. You know, speaking of Willie T. Ribbs, he's going to be competing in the SRX coming up this summer, and I just wanted to know, you know, what are your thoughts on the SRX as well?
Well, it's going to be very interesting because, you know, it's all short track based, right? And they're going to be on asphalt, you know, and pavement as well as dirt. And as I understand it, it's like you don't have your own crew chief. It's kind of like a draw maybe or something like that in terms of how you get paired with your crew chief. So, I mean, I just think the whole idea about it is wild. And, you know, you got drivers from different disciplines. You got IndyCar drivers, NASCAR drivers, you know, multi-quote-unquote discipline drivers like Willie T. and Ernie Francis. I'm definitely going to be watching, you know. I mean, people have asked me, you know, would you want to be in it? And I'm like, no, not really, because I just wasn't brought up on short tracks, and I don't really enjoy short tracks. I've always said that the faster the track for me, the better. So running around just, you know, swapping paint and, you know, leaning on each other and beating and banging and all that kind of stuff is, you know, okay, I think it will be very entertaining, but is it for me? No, not really. I was groomed as a road racer, right? So I thought my career would take me to the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, which it did 10 times. I'm a 10-time veteran of the 24 Hours of Daytona, or, you know, 24 Hours of Le Mans, or, you know, Sebring, you know, road racing circuits. That's really what, you know, my forte is. So for me to actually be in NASCAR at all was really just an anomaly, but I was glad that I was able to adapt my style enough to be successful at it. But, for this SRX series, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I've seen what the cars look like. I've seen some videos of the cars, and, I guess Schrader or whoever they have testing, running around on them on dirt and what have you. And even the way the car looks, it looks like a mini Ferrari F40 with the wing on the back and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, that's just a weird concept car, and it's going to be with 700 or so horsepower. So I think the entertainment value will be through the roof. And I'm just excited, like most people are, just to see how it gets carried off. I think there's going to be a whole lot of beat up, equipment by the end of the race. And I think that'll probably be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm really
what I would have changed about it is I would have diversified the schedule a little bit more. Like, I would have liked to see them go to maybe one or two road courses, maybe go to one of the mile and a halves, something like that. I kind of get it with this being a new series. I'm just trying to kind of test the waters, I think. So maybe a couple of years down the line, we see them start to transition into some of these other tracks.
Yeah, very well could be the case. Needless to say, with them all being pretty much on short track stuff, that makes it so that the type of equipment they run, as far as like the gear selections and all that kind of stuff, make it so that the expense is somewhat, curtailed. So that makes sense. They're just starting out. So, okay, let's all kind of run in a somewhat of a box and see whether or not it's effective. And if it is, I can wholeheartedly see them expanding, their reach after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. The SRX reminds me a lot of the old IROC series, the International Race of Champions, that I remember watching as a kid during the early to mid-2000s, obviously. And that's what I like about the SRX, is that it just gave me that vibe, because I always missed that there was this circuit where all these different drivers from all these different disciplines can come together and compete to be like, hey, who's going to be the best of them all kind of thing. I was always fascinated by that.
Yeah, no question. But, like you were just saying, for that to be an accurate accounting, then they have to take it to something other than just, bullring short tracks.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, you got to take it to a road course, because some of these guys have much more familiarity and expertise and ability, turning right and left as opposed to just turning left. But, for their initial inaugural season, I think it's a, pretty good platform. And, I think a whole lot of people will be watching, so myself included. So, let's see how it goes. If we all had a crystal ball and a Ouija board, we'd know exactly what the outcome is. But as they say, that's why they run the race, right? Just to see what happens.
Exactly, yeah. I'm definitely going to try.
Looking forward to being at a couple of those.
Yeah. We're thinking about going to IRP.
I'm actually running. Yeah, I'm running IRP for the midget race that night. So hopefully we have some free time to sit and watch that.
Yeah. Is it IRP again? Last time I was there was ORP. It was O'Reilly Raceway Park. Is it back to IRP now?
It's actually Lucas Oil Raceway Park now, but everyone still calls it IRP.
Yeah, it's like Sears Point in Sonoma. I always call it Sears Point, but now they call it Sonoma Raceway. I'm like, no, it's always going to be Sears Point for me.
And for a while it was called Infineon. It's just like, it's like when I was a kid, Charlotte Motor Speedway was Lowe's Motor Speedway. And then later we went back to Charlotte, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you can even look at it from the standpoint of NASCAR. It used to be the Winston Cup. It used to be the Nextel Cup, Sprint Cup, whatever the case is. Now it's like, okay, it's the Cup Series presented by XYZ. It's just, you can't keep this player straight without a scorecard, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's, I started watching NASCAR in 2004, and, when I visited my dad a few weeks ago, we were watching, I think it was the Atlanta Cup race, we were just talking about, how we've both been watching for so long now and just seeing how much the sport has changed from, 04 when we first brought in the idea of the chase for the Nextel Cup compared to now in 2021.
And just think about next year when they got the center lock wheels and, the car looks kind of to me like a Trans Am car nowadays. So they really changed things up. It's an evolving situation, and it should change because, again, the world's changing. But hopefully, there won't be an alienation of too many fans. There's all sorts of things politically, of course, that are challenging the sport. But, at the end of the day, let's hope that NASCAR continues to move forward and that, they're viable. It's been the case that they've been the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They basically sat both Indy cars and sports cars down and made them, secondary series. NASCAR's always been the one. Hopefully, it'll continue to go that way. But, there's a lot of changes out there now and a whole lot of, just up in the air in terms of where things are going to land.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, do you have anything else you wanted to chat about or bring up real quick?
Yeah, I was just curious. Is there anything more you wanted to go over about your sports car career? Just because going through your book, it was honestly really interesting to me, especially the Trans Am stuff, because I've always enjoyed that series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I would have never thought when I started out in racing that I would ever wind up in NASCAR. I mean, when I was young and I'm dating myself here, but, in the mid to late 60s when, I was watching ABC's Wide World of Sports, and you would see the Southern 500 or, Daytona 500, whatever, and you would see these cars running around. It just was not an inviting scenario to me because, first off, it was just running around in a circle, and I just couldn't understand. Why would you just run around in a circle? I would think that racing should be an extension of what you do on the street, which is turn right, you turn left, you upshift, you downshift, you accelerate, you brake. You don't drop it in fourth and just turn left. So I just was like, why are you trying to just turn left in fourth gear and stay off the concrete wall? Back in the day, they didn't have safer barriers, just a concrete wall. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So for me to actually get to NASCAR is just an anomaly in itself. But I thought my career would be either, as an IndyCar driver or as a sports car driver, road racing, sports cars, or road racing Indy cars, or running around an oval in an Indy car, because that was kind of what I thought was cool. I grew up in Northern California. I didn't grow up in the Deep South. So stock car racing was something that was just totally unfamiliar to me. And like I said, the type of racing just was, to my eye, somewhat unappealing. But, as I got older and I saw where the growth of the sport was, it was all about NASCAR. I was like, what, if you really want to make a name for yourself, you really want to race the best of the best, you go to NASCAR. And when I saw John Andretti make the pilgrimage from Indy cars in like the early 1990s, when he was driving Jim Hall's Chaparral Pennzoil-based car to come to NASCAR, all the sports cars and open wheel guys were looking at him like, why are you doing that? But he knew something that the rest of us didn't know, because he led a pilgrimage of drivers that tried to, throw their name in the hat and race in NASCAR, because they saw that was where the growth of the sport was. They saw that NASCAR was consistent. NASCAR every weekend they were racing. They weren't racing every, other week or every third week or once a month like some of the sports car series do. They were racing every weekend. They had the great TV package. They had the fans. They had just, everything that a race car driver wanted. You wanted to be on the big stage, and NASCAR was the big stage. So I just find it really interesting that I wound up here. But, at the end of the day, I consider myself a sports car driver. I'm a road racer. And so to be out there running around in circles, it's just, sometimes I just, now that my career is over for the most part, it's like I sit back and I kind of like shake my head going, how in the heck did I manage to do that? I never had any formal training in any discipline of racing. I mean, I never went to, as a road racer, I never went to Skip Barber or Jim Hall or, any of the racing schools. And when I came to NASCAR, I never went to any stock car schools. I just was self-taught and just was fortunate enough to have enough natural ability to make the grade. And so I've always, just been very fortunate in that respect. I just never had the financial wherewithal to be able to just do whatever it is I wanted to do, but perseverance and persistence basically, went a long way for me. I watched my father and how hard he worked, and, he is still a great role model for me. And I just watched what he did and how he applied himself. And, it's like, yeah, if you want it, you're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to work long. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to sacrifice. You're going to have to show gratitude for the things that you've been able to accomplish and people that have helped you along the way. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone if you really want it. But at the end of the day, you got to have a passion for it, because if you have a passion for it, you'll achieve it. It's something that if you think about it, right, the first thing in the morning when you get up and the last thing that you're thinking about before you go to bed, that's in your blood, you're given a gift to do it, you'll achieve it. And that's basically, the basis for winning in reverse. Basically my story terms of how I was able to, defy the motor racing odds. The odds were stacked severely, heavily against me. When I got to the Cup level in 2006, it had been 20 years since somebody that looked like me had driven a Cup car, and that was Willie T. And then it was 20 years before him, effectively, that Wendell Scott was in the seat. And after about, 15 years since I left, Bubba got his chance. So, it's just been a very difficult thing for those of color to get to, race in NASCAR. Fortunately, the nation has become more, I would say, accommodating, more accepting. It's still not a level playing field, and I don't feel like getting into all the nuances of everything that I'm talking about there, but I don't think I need to. I think people are very much aware just when they turn on the news about things that take place in our society and the injustices that take place. But all that aside, I was able to live my dream, and that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with what's going on in the country right now, because, now we've got more of these incidents that are coming out again. It seems like that's just becoming a regular thing here now. And, it definitely shows that we definitely still have a long way to go. But, just seeing people who are able to, overcome, what society could think of them, it's definitely great to see and shows that we are moving forward.
But we got a long way to go.
We do.
Yeah.
We do have a long way to go, and
we really do.
Yeah, when the whole Bubba thing broke out last year, I always said that NASCAR is for everyone. It's for anyone. We should all just be good to each other, respect others the way you want to be respected, and just try to be the best person you can be. That's what we strive to do, is just to be good to each other. I always believe that. So I'm always thrilled to see guys like you, like Bubba, out there racing. I just think it's a really cool sight to see. Like I said, last time you were on here, I talked about as a kid when I went to that race you qualified at in 06, and I was like, this is so cool. It's nice to see a guy like Bill Lesser out there getting his shot, and I look back on that, and I'll never forget it.
15 years ago, yeah. That was more than a minute.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So, just curious, I know you mentioned the possibility of returning to NASCAR. Any possibility towards maybe returning towards road racing in some form?
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you laid out, a NASCAR program for me versus a sports car program for me, I would lean towards a sports car program. That's in my heart of hearts. I'm a sports car driver, like I mentioned before. I would much prefer to do that. But, again, the light is cast, the spotlight is cast on NASCAR in this country. Everything is, in terms of appealing to sponsors and all that kind of stuff, and sponsors wanting value for their money, all people can talk about is NASCAR. And so if you're going to, try to put a program together, you try to give the sponsor as much value for their dollars as you can. And, they understand what NASCAR is. You talk about IMSA, and they're like, their eyes all of a sudden, glaze over. Like, what is IMSA? It's like, what? They understand the Rolex 24. Some of them do. Some of them understand the 12 hours of Sebring. But, when you get to races like the Watkins Glen 6 hour, they're like, what's that? You talk about races like at Barber Motorsports Park, which is where the Indy cars are going to be this weekend. They're like, where's Barber? That sort of thing. So when you think about Alabama, they think about Talladega, right? The racetrack in Alabama is Talladega. It's not Barber Motorsports Park. So, but, in terms of where I get the most satisfaction as a pure driver, and what I mean by that is the most responsive race cars that you can get behind the wheel of, first off, are open wheel cars. They are absolutely I've driven an Indy Lights car before, and it's like a pure extension of everything you want a car to do. It is immediately responsive. It's like a go-kart, right? I mean, you think you want it to do it, and it does it. You get behind the wheel of a stock car, and it's 3,500 pounds. It's got a 10-inch wide tire. It doesn't want to turn. It doesn't want to stop. When you talk about a light, sexy, nimble, open wheel car or sports car, it does what you want it to do, and the open wheel car is the most responsive because it's the lightest. And then the sports car comes next, and then the stock cars last on the list. But I just never really had that much of a desire to race open wheel because I just, 230 miles an hour into turn one at Indy, just, okay, maybe if I was 20 years old again, but not at this point in my life. So I like the idea of the security of being able to come back home after a race, and driving a sports car, and I'm pretty sure my wife would look at me like I had two heads if I even thought about going open wheel racing. So, yeah, at this point in my life, a sports car program would be very, very, appetizing to me. So that's the answer to your question.
Oh, yeah, and one thing, we bring up the sports car racing and the road racing, and, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on the, with now we're in the 2021 season, now they add all these road courses, what are your thoughts on some of the tracks they're going to?
I think it's great. I'm sure, again, the purists probably hate it. It's like, why did we ever leave the bull rings? Why did we ever even go to, intermediate tracks? Or, I hate those 1.5-mile cookie cutters, blah, blah, blah. But, for a guy like me, I enjoy watching, the stock car guys, the NASCAR guys run around on a road course. And it's provided just a lot of entertainment value. I think, sometimes I've looked at some social media comments and what have you, the armchair quarterbacks, and they're all like, man, that was a good race. That was a lot of fun. There was, a lot of passing and all that kind of stuff. And there was a bit of carnage and people, not being out of their element and not knowing what they were doing and all that kind of stuff. So I think the road courses are I think, a great source of entertainment. And that's really what NASCAR is at the end of the day. You ask anybody down there at One Daytona Boulevard what NASCAR is, first thing they'll tell you it's entertainment, It's like, yeah, it's sport, but it's entertainment. They refer to it, as everybody almost does, as the traveling circus, right? It's like, all right, let's unroll the tent here, put up the race, and okay, we'll roll it all up at the end of the day and go to the next city, right? That's kind of what it is. Let's be honest.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
No, that's what it is. They'll tell you. The brass will tell you down there. In the offices, it's entertainment. We got to make sure this race is entertainment, and the road courses provide a lot of entertainment. So I think it's pretty cool. Now a track like COTA, Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, the track is designed for like motorcycles, really. I mean, stock cars on a track like that, I'm going to be very interested to see how that works out because it's like 18, 20-something odd turns. It's like very slow turns. I mean, it's like, wow, do these cars have enough of a turning radius to make it through some of these corners, So I think that would not have been a track that I would have targeted for being a good race for NASCAR vehicles to be on. A place like Watkins Glen, which is where they go to, I think is a great track. Road America, great track. COTA, we'll see.
Yeah, the jury's out on COTA. It's going to be interesting to see, obviously, I think, with it being such a rather newer facility and state-of-the-art, and, I'm pretty sure people are like, ever since the track opened, we're like, hey, what would it be like had NASCAR tried to run at COTA? So I guess we're going to find out here in about a month or so when NASCAR makes the trip down there. So that's going to be interesting to watch for sure. It's definitely one of my pinpoints on the 2021 schedule. And you mentioned how it could feel like a traveling circus, and you make a really good point because, of all the Kentucky races that Michael and I have been to, obviously, we take exit 55 off of I-71. It's a party. People are all camped out. People are all tailgating. And it's like a big party.
Yeah, absolutely. I think COTA, you could almost be like, if those that are, watching or listening, I should say, watch the IndyCar race at Barber. As tight as that place is, that's what COTA's like. I don't know if you guys ever been there, but Barber is like a motorcycle track that the Indy cars can run on, but it's really tight, and it's even tighter in sports cars right there. And if heaven forbid they put stock cars on Barber, I mean it's just a very, very narrow track, and I think COTA is kind of like a fairly similar in that respect or that regard. And I just think there's going to be a whole lot of crumpled up sheet metal around there because there are a number of corners where there's just no way that two stock cars are going to get through there together.
Oh yeah, it's going to be crazy. And not only that, we talk about all the road courses. They've also talked about the idea of potential street course race. iRacing is scanning that idea of a Chicago street course. What are your thoughts? Do you think NASCAR would be able to handle running on street courses, especially that some of those tracks that IndyCar has ran in the past are quite narrow?
Right. I think, having stock cars on a street course would be pretty cool. Not a bunch of street courses, but maybe a street course, maybe two at the most. But as long as it's wide enough and it's conducive for passing, without having to just wreck somebody to get past them. That's the sort of thing that I would be concerned about. A lot of the street courses are just so narrow that it would be hard to run stock cars on there. And, it's just because, again, stock cars just don't have the turning radiuses that, these smaller, more nimble cars do. They're used to turning tight in the corners, and stock cars just really aren't. They're not built that way. So, as long as it's a, track or a circuit that's conducive to, some decent side-by-side without having to use somebody up to get to the corner, I'm all for it. I think it would be something cool because a lot of the street courses, as you can't see around the corner. There's lots of blind corners and stuff like that, and that just adds to the level of excitement and, the complicity and all that kind of stuff, or I should say the difficulty that you have to, to utilize to get through them. So I'd be down for it. I'd love to see it. And I think, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, back in the 80s, I think there was like a ARCA race or something like that, or Southwest Tour or something like that at Long Beach. And so they've run stock cars on street courses before, and I think it was a pretty good race. But I don't know. I think maybe the purists killed it or something like that. I don't know why it didn't continue on, but it would not be novel to see stock cars on a street course.
Yeah, I think it
was on some LA track. I don't know if it was Long Beach.
It was the late 90s, early 2000s. It was the Southwest Tour. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's been done before, and it can be done, like I said, as long as it's a track that's conducive to some good running without having, like I said, to just completely wreck somebody to get past them. That's just BS. But as long as, it's laid out in terms of it being wide enough so that, and with good passing zones, then, it could be a successful event.
Yeah, obviously I think one of the places everyone would talk about is Long Beach, just because, that is the street course race in America. And honestly, most of the track I think would be good for it because you got a few long, wide straightaways that could definitely open the door for some passing. My one concern would be that tight-ass last hairpin turn.
Yes, the right-hander going onto the main straight.
There.
Yeah, that would be an issue. That tight right-hander onto the long straight would be just, the start-finish straight. That would be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd almost have to talk about, somehow reconfiguring the course to bypass that, which probably could be done. It would just be a matter of figuring it out. Just because the other issue with the street course is that, it's based on what the city will allow, and obviously these streets need to be open to the public most of the time. So really, you'd have to schedule this sometime around when the Long Beach Grand Prix is. So, and if you have to make that course alteration, you have to take into account how long that's going to take to do, and sort of the window you have to get them both in.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, the news came out today, actually, that it looks like they're taking a step forward now on possibly getting a F1 race down in Miami by Hard Rock Stadium. It says here from the Sports Business Journal, the Miami Garden City Council last night passed a resolution to sign a memorandum and understanding with Formula One and Hard Rock Stadium, a major boost to the effort that raises the prospect of a race as soon as 2022. Obviously, I think you got to think about the public opinion about a street course race. People might complain about the noise or, as you said, shutting down the roads for a certain period of time because of the race and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'm that's first I'd heard that they have really gotten some of the approval that's necessary to move forward, because I've heard about that since last year. And I thought basically it just lost all its steam and its momentum. But to hear now that, things have an opportunity to go forward is pretty cool. I've seen, illustrations of what the configuration would be, and it looks pretty interesting. And Formula One's always wanted to have more than one race in the States. Back when they had, at the race at Indianapolis, and then at, COTA as well, they've always really wanted to have two. But, then Indianapolis went away. And they've always been looking for a second venue. So, yeah, they've been targeting, the Miami, Florida area, and it looks like maybe they're going to be successful.
Yeah. This gets through. I would be super excited for it. I think it's going to be a terrific idea for a street course. I remember, I think it was about 10 years ago or so, they tried to get one out for New York City around the Port Imperial Circuit. That one just never really took off in terms of construction and everything, even though especially, they announced it and everything else. So it would be cool to see something new and something different.
Well, that circuit wound up becoming like a Formula E track. So
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, they ran Formula E there in New York, or wherever it was up there, in the Northeast. But
yeah,
that's a whole different kettle of fish there, Formula E. So.
Mhm. Oh yeah. All right. So, Michael, anything else you wanted to add?
I think I've covered everything I need to.
All right. Good deal. Yeah. You guys have talked me out. Mission accomplished.
We do that, man.
You're a fun guy to talk to. It's great having you on. It's always fun to just sit down with somebody and listen to the stories and listen to, all sorts of different things. You talk about your road racing background and everything else. I always find it fascinating.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been, fortunate enough to apply myself in different disciplines of racing and just always had, fairly decent, I guess, natural ability and been able to apply it and, network with the right people to, help me achieve the dreams and my goals, and just was able to get there. So it could have, like I said before, gone very differently, but glad that everything worked out the way it has. People have asked me before, if you could have done it over again, would you have changed anything? And I said, no. I took advantage of every opportunity, every door that was opened, every door that I kicked open, and did it to the best of my ability, and to carry myself to the best of my ability, and I don't believe that I could point to anything that I was said, hey, if I had done that over again, because it all builds on itself. It's all there for a reason, and all you can do is look forward. I don't really look back. I just look forward to see what's next, and who knows? Don't be surprised you see me, putting a helmet on again and showing up somewhere.
We will certainly look forward to that. Well,
absolutely.
I think I'll go ahead and wrap. What's that, Michael?
I was just saying, absolutely. Definitely looking forward to whenever that happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this edition of the Dropping the Hammer Racing Hour. Be sure to check us out on our new Twitter and YouTube as well. Once again, a huge thank you to Bill Lester for coming on. It was great talking to you again, and perhaps we'll have you on again here at some point soon.
You just never know. Thank you guys for having me on, and for those listening, the book is called Winning in Reverse, either at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or BillLester.com. It's there.
Absolutely. Be sure to check out Bill Lester's book. And with that, from Michael Klein and myself, Alex Gray, signing off, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.